Good evening, everyone, on this hot, hot, hot summer Sunday. It's great to see you all here for this wonderful program. My name is Beth Norton, and I'm the Director of Music Ministry for First Parish in Concord, Massachusetts. And I'm delighted that First Parish in Concord, our music ministry, and our Racial Justice Action Group are able to sponsor this evening of Ancestral Homeland, a journey to transformative narrative, a conversation with two incredible artists. And we are very proud that the UU Urban Ministry has chosen to host this and worked so wonderfully with us. And I want to especially thank Greg Friedman and Nora Sullivan for your assistance and coordination with all of this. You've really made it an easy thing for us to sponsor, and we're so delighted to be able to do that. I also want to thank Leslie Fisher, who is a representative of our Racial Justice Action Group, for all the work that she has done to help make this possible. I think all I'm here to do is to welcome you and to say thank you for taking time out of your day to be part of this witness. And without further ado, I will introduce Bithyah Israel, who is the UU Urban Ministry's Social Justice Fellow for the Arts and the Humanities. Take it, Bithyah.
Thank you, Beth, and good evening, everyone. Again, I'd like to welcome you to tonight's event. I'm Bithyah Israel, Social Justice Fellow for the Arts and Humanities here at the UU Urban Ministry, where we are delighted to have pivoted during the pandemic and during the shutdown. We found a way to continue hosting events featuring artists and the arts with a social justice lens. Many of you probably saw the videos from which some of the artwork played in the opening slideshow. And it was an honor to produce those videos featuring Gloretta, Baynes, and Christle, Rawlins-Jackson. Not only was it interesting to hear their stories, their travels, and what they learned through those experiences, but it also was very compelling to hear about the broader issues that their art really addresses. So I'm very much looking forward to our interactive conversation, into which you are also invited. Gloretta and Christle both, when we spoke about this event, were clear that they really wanted you, the audience, to feel invited to participate. So we invite you to submit questions, thoughts into the chat. The chat is on the bottom of your Zoom screen. We invite you anytime during this event to post your questions, and we look forward to addressing them. Near the end of tonight's event, around the last 10 minutes, we'll also invite a few people who we have time from hearing from. If you would like to directly ask a question or make a comment, we'll invite you to unmute yourself and to actually speak also. So during the event, please feel invited to submit your questions, comments, and as many as we're able to, we would like to address. So now, moving right along, I would like to introduce our first artist, Christle Rawlins-Jackson. She's an artist, photographer, poet, and award-winning graphic designer. She currently works for the Community Church of Boston as the Communications and Publications Manager. Rawlins-Jackson, born in Boston and raised in Framingham, Massachusetts, has spent many years visiting countries in West Africa, as well as moving to Ghana for 5 years with her husband. While living in Ghana, she was instrumental in setting up the communication department at African University College of Communications in Adabraka. Her poetry was featured in 2020 Women Musicians Network concert at the Berkeley Performance Center, and her poem, Cape Coast Castle, is featured in the award-winning documentary Black and Black by Zadi Zoku. She is in the process of writing about her maternal ancestors, the Black Loyalists of Nova Scotia. She is the current president of the Beacon Hill Scholars, an organization dedicated to the preservation of the history of 19th century African American abolitionists who lived and owned businesses on Beacon Hill. She is founding member and vice president of Sisters and Stitches, whose mission is to uphold the tradition of African American quilting and to provide education about the rich history of people of color and cloth. Her fiber art has appeared in exhibits throughout the United States. And now let's see an excerpt from our Amplification Project video featuring Christle Rawlins-Jackson.
In Ghana, there is a slave fort probably every 2.5 miles along the coast, which I had no idea before going there, that these slave forts just kind of overcame the entire coast. Some of them, there's just remnants, but there are many that are still standing. And so the first thing that you do when you go there, is you're brought to the slave forts. The first time I went, we were waiting to go into the slave dungeon in Cape Coast Castle. And a group was coming out as we were going in. And some of the people were being literally carried out. They had passed out. There were people who were crying. There were people who had this dazed look on their face, like they had seen something so horrible that they were traumatized. They were in shock. And I didn't want to go in there because of what I saw on the faces of the people that came out. And it's an empty room. There's nothing in there except for the residue of the agony of the people who were put in these dungeons.
Gloretta Baynes is the director for the African American Master Artists in Residence program, AMARP, founded by Master Artist Dana Chandler. She is an independent curator and consultant and the associate curator with artist curator Rob Stull for Sequential Art, The Next Step, and the Violence Transformed exhibition series. Gloretta is the former assistant director and registrar for the Museum of the National Center of Afro-American Artists and past member of the Museum of Fine Arts Diversity Committee. She was a chair for the Registrar's Committee of the Association of African American Museums and exhibition designer for Community Creations, an annual exhibition hosted by the Gardner Museum. Her current works in progress, based on her travels to Cuba, Nigeria, and Ghana, include a Cuba suite and Revisioning Africa, a photographic narrative on contemporary Nigerian and Ghanaian art and artists, and the cultural institutions that support their artistic production. And now, let's see an excerpt from the video featuring Gloretta Baynes.
I found that my ancestry was Yoruba Nigerian, and I felt very compelled to be able to try to tell their stories, because you heard about it, but you didn't see their faces. You didn't know what they were trying to accomplish being students and what their aspirations were. It was 276 young women who were kidnapped from that school. Represent a lot of what these women are going through in terms of them not being whole, or of them being shattered or shredded, their lives in tatters. I mean, there's a lot of ways of looking at that fabric and interpreting what it could possibly mean. These are young women who wanted to be judges and artists and pilots, lawyers, and they were the next generation of leaders in Nigeria. And for them to be kidnapped and to have their dreams circumvented that way was a tragedy. And I wanted to be able to at least, honor them in some way, so they're not forgotten.
And now, before I introduce Christle and Gloretta, I am reminded that they asked me to please make a note about the music in their videos. I composed the pieces as reflections of both the times that have been on the national conscience and also the content in their interviews, which we will touch on very shortly. Gloretta Baynes' video, in that video, you'll hear a piece called Taking a Knee. During the composition of that project, I actually was mourning the death of George Floyd, and taking a knee actually has a double meaning. Kaepernick took a knee, and George Floyd also took a knee to his body. So that also complemented Gloretta's topics. Also in Christle Rawlins-Jackson's video, you'll hear a piece called Considering. And that is really a reflection of how beautiful Ghana is. The water, the land, and also the atrocities that happened with that backdrop. So thank you, Gloretta and Christle, for asking me to make that note. And now I'd like to introduce Gloretta and Christle. Welcome.
Hello, glad to be here.
Thank you.
Hi.
It's so great to have you. Thank you so much. And this is such a treat for me because having interviewed you both extensively for those videos, we could only take maybe 7 minutes from those interviews. So I'm really excited for the audience to hear more from you. Let's go ahead and pose the first question, and anyone who would like to can take it. The first question is, how did your travels to Africa impact the narratives in your artwork?
I think that I was extremely fortunate to be able to have that opportunity to go to Africa. I did not anticipate that I would ever have that opportunity. Once I was able to ascertain that that was going to be a reality for me, it was quite transformative. I ended up going to Nigeria and Ghana, and I met with a number of our cultural partners there. In Nigeria, I met with the Oyo Foundation, which was a foundation that mentors and supports contemporary and traditional artists in Nigeria. And I also was able to participate in the Orisha World Conference, which was also a foundation for me to understand who I was culturally. So to be able to reach out to the traditional and contemporary artists of Nigeria and also have a spiritual awakening was something that was quite profound for me.
Thank you, Gloretta. Christle?
Well, I'd say that it was also very transformative, and I've gone so many times and had so many different experiences, but I think that first trip that I went to the slave forts for the first time, as you heard in the clip, I didn't really know which one you were going to show, but but that really inspired my poetry. I didn't write poetry before then. And something was just saying that I needed to like channel the voices of my ancestors, those who didn't have, weren't able to speak for themselves. And I knew that they were there. I knew, you know, I don't have a documentation. I don't know I can't call the name, but I know that they were there. And so it was impossible for me not to begin to write poetry because that was the way in which I think that they wanted to be heard. And of course, the atmosphere of Africa, of Ghana, you know, of the culture, the clothes, the music, just beautiful. It's like people are walking pieces of art. And the other thing is that it's very familiar, which I wasn't expecting, that you'd look in someone's face and you'd say, well, that person looks like my auntie, you know, and not knowing exactly where I come from, that was also like a confirmation. Yes, I am from here because I can see my family's faces in these people that I don't know. So surely I'm from one of these tribes here.
Speaking of transformative narratives, I think I would like to pick up where you left off, Christle. So this familiar feeling, and then also Gloretta, you talk about an awakening. I never really thought about it really to the extent that it became clear, Christle, when you talked about when you visited Ghana, how the descendants that are here in America, many people are descendants of the people who left the motherland. And so there's a separation of histories, of narratives. What did you feel that you came away with after having this awakening, this familiar feeling, comparing yourself to before the trip and after the trip? What can you expand on?
Well, I had more of a global perspective on things. And, you know, I must say that when you're in America, you're channeled to just, you know, you're caught up in paying your bills and working, and you don't see a lot of news about other places. You really don't. And so they're really not important to you, you know, because you can't relate. But going to Ghana, you got all the news, which was kind of interesting. And you got the perspective of how other countries viewed the United States. And so that in itself like informed me about what art I should be doing, or it went into anything that I did then and that I'm doing now. And it's this whole idea of communicating and telling these stories in a way that invites people to experience it. And I can say, you know, I make something because I think, you know, whether it's a quilt or a poem, but it has brought people to tears, which means that I must have touched some place. And hopefully that means that you know, the transformation that has happened with me, maybe it will happen to that person who's experiencing my art.
Thank you. Gloretta?
In terms of transformation, I had my DNA mapped, and I realized and found out that my ancestry was Yoruba, Nigerian. And when I was going through customs at the Nigerian airport, what was really interesting is that I got separated out from my colleagues and put into the Nigerian line to have my passport checked. And they said, oh, no, you're Nigerian. You go to this line. And my rest of colleagues were waved to in a different direction. And it struck me right then and there that they knew who I was before I knew who I was, that they were affirming my identity as a woman of African descent. And being there at that particular moment really made me understand where I belonged. And I just felt so embraced by that whole opportunity And that's just the circumstances of being there at that particular time. And I think that having the opportunity to be in your ancestral home, it gives you a foundation that's unshakable. It fortifies you. It makes you understand what's really important. As Christle was saying, that we're dealing with everyday stresses in life. But if you don't know or know who you are and where you come from, you're vulnerable. You know, if you don't stand for something, believe in something, you're going to be devastated. You're not going to be able to be successful. You're not going to be able to grow professionally or creatively. You need to know your foundation and where you came from. You know, it just gave me a solace and fortitude I didn't think was possible. You know, once I stepped off that plane and stepped into the soil in Nigeria, I truly felt like I was at home.
Those comments seem to also transcend race. It seems like a very human need to feel like you're home, whether it be a family reunion or seeing extensions of oneself and feeling like I belong here. I didn't even know I was lost, and I'm here. I didn't know I was missing. Yes. Thank you for your comments. And audience, feel free to put any comments or questions in. The second question I have is, what part does your art play in conveying transformative narratives?
One of the things that I like to do is that when I think of a concept, I like to do a lot of research to make sure that what I'm trying to convey is accurate, that when people are viewing the work, they'll be able to have an emotional response to it on whatever level is appropriate for them. And it's been very rewarding when people have come up to me and look at a certain piece and translate and interpret it in ways that I didn't even realize was integral to the work. And it's educational, it's cultural, but it's also very healing to know that, you know, the works that you produce, you know, the heart and soul and desire to have that type of communication is being realized and appreciated, not by the general public, by whoever is the viewer at that particular time, you know, being impacted by the work that you create, you know, the stories that you're trying to tell, the narratives in terms of current events or social justice or crises, you know, they can relate and they understand on different levels, you know, how that can help them through a healing process.
Gloretta, someone posted in the chat, that was my next question, is can you give an example of hearing from a viewer, something they realized that kind of hit you differently than you had expected?
Well, one of the works that I did was called Sankofa, and it was based on historical circumstance with women who were incarcerated in Parchment Cemetery Penitentiary in Mississippi. And the images of the women who were incarcerated were dressed in uniforms that they actually created and sewn themselves. And what I wanted to do was to show the dignity of these women who were incarcerated in spite of the adversity and devastation that they were going through in being incarcerated. They had a quiet strength that they were able to show in those images. And I wanted to portray them and also bring to light what it is that Black women go through, you know, if they're in the prison system, how they were being exploited, you know, and these circumstances, they, in the prison, they raised the crops, they sold the clothes for the inmates, they took care of the livestock. So basically they were being exploited in terms of the labor. So it was basically convict leasing labor and slavery by another name. But those stories are very rarely told. And for people to look at the works and how I incorporated the historical narratives along with Dikra and other textiles and mixed media pieces, they were able to look at the different threads and read what I was trying to convey to them. And then they selected areas they were particularly interested in knowing more about.
Definitely. And for viewers who haven't been able to see these videos, I definitely encourage you to, you'll see this piece that Gloretta is speaking about, and it definitely was compelling. Christle?
Well, you said something about that, you know, it was beyond like the color line, but I think that most people don't get the opportunity to go to Africa. And there's all these stereotypes. And when people say, they talk about Africa as if it is a country as opposed to a continent. And so the fact that I would, you know, like I have a quilt that I did about Ya Santiwa, and she was a queen who fought against the British, you know, in 1900. But I don't think people know that history. She's a huge heroine.
She's a warrior.
She's a warrior. She's like, you know, Xena or one of the.
Forget about Wonder Woman. That's our Wonder Woman. Yeah. She's our warrior.
She was an older person. She was a senior when she was, you know, carrying her Danish musket and riding horseback, fighting the British. You know, and so we don't really get. We usually see the starving child, you know, famine and that kind of thing, and it's really quite the opposite. You know, it's vibrant, and so, you know, so when I'm creating an artwork and it you know, it's reflecting back to Africa, it actually is teaching people about, you know, how Africa really is, how, you know, and I haven't traveled all over Africa. I've only been to, you know, West Africa for the most part. I've gone to South Africa, which was much different. So each experience is just unique in itself. And of course, there are these similarities between African Americans and Africans, but they have their own cultures, their own language. And if some of that is conveyed, you know, in my artwork, I think that it becomes a great teaching tool for people.
Definitely. Yes.
Another theme that continuing on that theme, Christle, Gloretta talked about in our interview, the transferring of knowledge across generations. One of her pieces shows that. And Christle, when you talk about knowledge and understanding of the real narratives in Africa and how many there are, what do you think can be done more of to get this transcontinental understanding? And perhaps America maybe is a little more isolated than some other countries. But what would you suggest we can do more of to kind of bridge the gaps that have existed for so long?
Well, you know, words are very powerful, as the poet says. So why not call it what it is, as opposed to when you're talking about a country, calling it Africa all the time, or referring it to as the dark continent, because that, you know, it has the most sun, you know, anywhere. So why would you call it? That just makes it sound so ominous, you know, and so just by doing these things, just changing the perspective, and then, you know, maybe try to get to know somebody who was born there, you know, so that you can see for yourself, you can learn for yourself, and even celebrate, you know.
That is a very powerful thing to do. And now with the internet, there are just so many ways we literally can connect with people across the globe. So thank you for that advice. Christle, we have a request if you can share some of a poem or speak about a poem that you've heard.
Well, I can talk about my Cape Coast castle. I actually thought that the poem would be in the clip, so I'm not really prepared to recite a poem, but my Cape Coast Castle is probably the most connected for me directly, because I write a lot of poems and people will think, oh, well, that's you right now. And it's not, it's the voice of someone else. But the Cape Coast Castle is about going to the slave dungeons and then realizing, then being transformed back in time and living the life of your ancestor. And feeling the pain and the sadness and the hurt and the anger. And that is what I felt when I was at the slave ports. It's really unexplainable that you have so many feelings all at one time. And I really couldn't, I couldn't really express it when I talked to people. It's really something, like you have to go there to understand it. But at the same time, I think I knew that I needed to kind of convey that to other people, and it was through the poem, Cape Coast Castle, and it's actually online. It's Berkeley Performing Center, the Women's Network, Music Network, and in 2020 I performed it. So if you'd like, you can Google that and listen for yourself.
Thank you. And near the end of this event, we will be posting contact information for Christle and for Gloretta. So if you'd like to reach out and get more information about anything that's mentioned during today, you'll be able to do that. Gloretta and Christle, can you talk a little bit about the sharing of your artwork, about the narratives that you came across and learned about in your visits to Ghana, Nigeria, and the reception of those?
The reception of the art?
Yes, I remember, Gloretta, you mentioned that you were invited and you had some interactions with the artist community, I believe.
Definitely.
Yes, if you could speak a little bit about that.
Well, I think that in that process, we, as I met the indigenous artists there in both Nigeria and Ghana, we all agreed that the role of an artist was to tell a story, to teach, to educate, to advocate, to celebrate, experience, and share wisdom. And across continents, that vision was the same. And I found that everyone was open in terms of talking about the types of works they do, just being embraced and having the opportunity to see the types of works that were being created with the traditional artists and the contemporary artists, working with the cultural foundations that hosted us, and to see the incredible work that they were doing, supporting the public art there. Recently in Nigeria, through the Oyasef Foundation, the first privately funded museum is now open. That was created by Prince Yemisi Shalon. And it's the first of its kind, based on his personal collection of contemporary and traditional works. And to see those types of leaps and bounds and the incredible works that are being created by contemporary African artists is amazing and very inspirational for me. And I'm looking forward to helping to spread the word and to help advocate for more of an exchange with the African diaspora here in the States of the quality and caliber of the works that they have. It's an important part of our history that many people aren't aware of. They understand the traditional works, but they're very unfamiliar with the contemporary works that are being produced on the continent right now. And it's just really amazing and compelling and profound work.
Thank you. And Christle, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say that I think that artists are revered more so than they are here. I think if you're an artist in the United States, you know, it's a hard road. You know, you do it because it's in your bones. You know, it's something that you have to do. You know, you don't really have a choice. That's not always how you're received, you know, in the U.S. My experience in Ghana and Nigeria, even in Benin, I've been to Benin, is that artist is revered, and in some instances, you know, they come from generations of people who are known as artists, you know, or dancers, or performers, or whatever. And so that knowledge has been passed down from generation to generation, and it's it is revered, I guess you would say. So that was my comment.
That's eye-opening as well for an American-based artist, to hear the role in society that artists hold in other places. And Gloretta, you talked about the advocacy amongst people here, perhaps newcomers to the art scene, maybe new artists who maybe just are not able to make the trip right now. Is there anything you can say that you would love to be able to do to foster some of this understanding that sometimes you can only get from putting your feet down in Ghana, in Nigeria, or just being there in the homeland? But what would you like to transfer to these new artists who could benefit so much from knowing what you both know?
Well, in my capacity as our AIM Up director, we've had a number of artists from the continent come visit our galleries and studios, and to do workshops, do lectures, and to engage with the community at large. And that is part of our mission. And I'm proud to say that, you know, we've been able to reach out to many artists in West Africa to visit and collaborate with us on a number of different types of grants. And I would like to continue working to help foster those type of relationships. It's very important to keep those dialogues open. And sometimes it's very difficult, you know, based on, especially right now, there was a pandemic, but, you know, we still maintain relationships, we still communicate with each other, and we're still supportive of each other. So I'm adamant that we keep those bridges open. And those conversations with our sisters and brothers over on the continent. There's so much they can share and so much we can learn from them.
Yes, thank you. Christle?
I don't have that kind of access, but I just have the conversation with people, you know. And many times they'll ask, you know, can we get a bite to eat and, you know, talk about Africa, you know. I want to know more. I'm thinking about going, you know, what do I need to know? And so I would gladly just, you know, if you, you know, want to pick my brain to get a better understanding and prepare for, you know, if you're going to, you know, decide to make that trip, which I suggest that everyone, no matter.
Everybody must.
Everybody should go at least once. Just to experience it for yourself. It can only, you know, enhance who you are. But yeah, that's pretty much what I have done since I've come back, is just, you know, impart what I've learned to whoever is interested in listening.
I got another comment. Someone is asking for more information about how to reach Christle's poetry. So again, we will be posting contact information. So that will be at the end of the event. If there's no other comment or question, Christle or Gloretta or both, can you bring us into your experience in Ghana or in Nigeria? Things that maybe might be considered mundane, like the types of beings that you encountered, or different customs that is just things that are just a part of life. And I say beings because, you know, in the history of the United States, there are, you know, parts of agriculture that are imports that people literally smuggled when they were brought here involuntarily. These are a big part of life. Food is a big part of life. So if you can give us a little bit of your experience, those daily interactions or things that you came across that were completely different from what we experience where we are right now.
Well, I have to admit, when I was in Africa, I ate very well, and people love to eat, and so did I. And so that was a culinary experience for me. But I remember on the road trip in Nigeria, something that was really interesting was to see these huge trucks carrying yams, just yams. And then there's also different types of pounders and the mortars that they use for the yams that they would sell on the side of the road. So you're going like 100 miles an hour, you know, going through the highway, but you see, you know, all the trucks with the yams and different types of produce being transported. And I found that really fascinating. Mm-hmm. So that was really interesting. But the other thing that I thought was compelling is I didn't think I would have an opportunity to go to Ghana. And John Biggers, who is a historically significant mural artist that I hosted at the MFA, and I always admired, mentored me in terms of where I should go in terms of my career, being an administrator as opposed to fulfilling my potential as a working artist. And he had mentioned something to me, and he said that you should go to Africa. If you go to Africa, all your questions will be answered. And I was kind of curious to hear that, because this is like, well, first of all, how would I get to Africa, and what kind of questions is he really talking about? But because I had such an admiration for his work and I was so inspired by it, once I had the opportunity to go to Ghana, I actually found myself on the beach looking at fishermen pulling in fish, which is the exact same drawings that he did in the 50s from a book that I have from him. And I'm standing on the same shores that he was standing on, you know, documenting those very activities. And it was just a moment that I will never forget, because I began to understand what he was saying, you know, just to go and to feel the soil and the water of your ancestral home. And don't say, I don't think I can do it, or I won't ever have the opportunity. I didn't think that I would be able to go, but the opportunity presented itself and I went. And I'm forever grateful, you know, for that opportunity and that spiritual transformation that I accomplished when I was there.
Thank you. Christle?
It's funny, Gloretta, that you should talk about the fishermen, because my husband, some of you know, my husband, Rawlins-Jackson, is a photographer, and he has this really beautiful image of the fishermen carrying their nets after they've finished hauling them in. And it's the way that they've done it for like hundreds of years. And it's a very powerful. Well, we went to that very spot where he had taken the photograph, and I kept saying, but I don't see, I'm not seeing that. But I have my own vision. I mean, it's not, they're doing what they always do. But there was one day where they were coming and the mist was rising, and they had the nets, they put them around their neck, and they just carried them. They were like this tinted blue. And, you know, there may be like, you know, 20, 30 people, and they're all carrying these nets after they pulled them in. And so that was a really surreal experience. And I should say that they, at the beginning, when they start off, they have the ropes tied around these coconut trees, and they brought the nets way out so that they could catch the fish. And they chant, they sing. So it's almost like those songs, that, you know, when they're in the railroad and those that's sort of what it sounds like. And so they do that to keep time, so that they all pull at the same time. And they're, and some of them are in these, it's like a log that's dug out, a full tree that's dug out, and that's their canoe. And the only difference from like 200 years ago is that there's a motor on the back of it.
Wow.
So I guess they're guiding the nets. So it's this whole thing, and it takes all day. They start like dark, and eventually they get their fish, and then all the market women come out and they get their select so that they can bring it to the market and sell it. So it's a pretty amazing experience.
Christle, you have fabric work also. Can you speak about the role that fabric plays in society there in Ghana?
Well, that's that could be a talk in itself, but the fabric is like a language. It's essential to everything. If you're going to have a wedding, you have fabric made up specifically for the wedding, and everybody gets a piece of the fabric and they make their outfit. If it's a funeral, people have the funeral cloth, and they put you'll see the picture of the person who passed away on the cloth. Whatever the event is, you can find cloth. So the cloth has its language and it speaks to people. And somebody told me that she told this person off because she knows that person maybe was seeing her husband or something to that effect, right? So she had a cloth made up with the symbols on it and the color and everything, so that woman would know to stay away from her husband. I mean, is that specific? I don't know if it's true or not, but somebody told me that story. And of course, we have the Adinkra symbols, which that comes out of Ghana, and it comes out of the the Kumasi area where where Yasakiwa, not too far where Yasakiwa was from, and that village creates these Adinkra symbols. And what's really interesting about the symbols is that they've evolved into worldwide as a symbol of like Black people, of African American culture, and so you see people using those Adinkra symbols on everything. There's hundreds of them, and it's something that's static. If there's something that comes up, they'll create an Adinkra symbol for it, like the Queen of England, and they made an Adinkra symbol for her, and then had the fabric made up in order to, honor her when she came. People would wear whatever outfit they were in this cloth, so that that they were paying tribute to her. So it's very important, essential, and the fabric is amazing. It's like when you go to the market, and I'm talking like you go to a store that's like Max or something, or Saks, and it's ceiling to floor, full of fabric. And then it changes every few months to new fabric, so people have the latest fashion of, colors and designs. It's quite interesting and very, like, as I said, very essential to the culture and to the people. But a side note to this is that this fabric is actually made in the Netherlands. So they do have some fabric they have textile mills in Ghana that make their own fabric, but they're also from the Netherlands. So they kind of co-opted that. But they make, so it's interesting what you say is African fabric.
That's interesting. That is interesting. A question came in. Let's see. It says, a question for either speaker. Both of you mentioned that artists are revered where you visited. Would you say that there is a greater presence of art, of experiencing art in the everyday lives of the population in general? If so, can you talk a bit about that greater presence in daily life? What is it like? Thank you for your question, Rebecca.
I was thinking that I should have said about the cloth that people look like art, it's not uncommon to see like 3 people in this amazingly beautiful fabric, gold and orange, with these bright, beautiful colors, just waiting for the bus or the trocha to go somewhere. And so I think that this idea of creativity is ingrained in the culture of the people. So it's not separate, like here, it's a separate thing. Like one of the things that they do is the traffic is really, really bad in Accra, in Ghana. I mean, it's really, really bad. It's worse than Boston, believe it or not. It would take 2 hours to get someplace that should take you 20 minutes. But they have realized that you're like a co-opted customer, and so you can go shopping. In the 2 hours you're waiting on the highway, you can go shopping for pretty much everything. And I say all that to say that you'll see the market woman with her t-shirt and her her wrap and around her head. They all are coordinated with the oranges that are on her, that she's carrying on her head, in perfect symmetry. So yeah, so what I'm saying all that to say that everyday life people show these signs of art, being creative.
I think that everything that's utilitarian is also created in a creative manner. So things that have utility are beautiful and creative. Even though it's just a utilitarian item, an everyday item, but each of it is artfully done, in terms of design, lines, color, and the vibrance of the colors and the crazy mix of patterns and shapes and designs. It's just, it can be overwhelming. It's just like, wow, where am I? Because we try to, it's like sensory overload. It's like, oh, we're going to the mall in Ghana. There are malls in Ghana? Okay, so you're shopping, and as Christle saying, that there's the markets with all, the indoor markets as well as outdoor markets of fabrics, and you get custom-made clothing and things tailored, but it's done with a very artistic and creative eye, and that's something that is ingrained in the society there.
Thank you. And there are a couple more questions and comments, but I do have a question as an artist also, and that is, if art is so ingrained in the everyday, for example, well, most people do, these artistic things, how is an artist differentiated? If there is so much of a prolific existence of art in the everyday?
But you have your traditional artists, and then you have your contemporary artists, as Flo was saying. And so, the wood cutting in Ghana, is amazing. And you go there, and so you can experience that. They have I haven't been there for a while, but I understand they're having more and more contemporary galleries where you can, just like here, you can go in and look at whoever the artist is, and it's more international. So you may have somebody from Senegal, you may have somebody from different places, in the continent, and so you have that interaction. But then you can also go to different parts where they traditionally do, like I said, the Adinkra symbols, which is put on cloth, or beads, beading, and particularly in Nigeria, the beading is just like out of this world. But so that's how it's differentiated, I guess, by contemporary as well as the traditional.
Thank you. Okay, let's see here. I'm reading these comments. I'm trying to make this as smooth as possible here. This is more of a question. This is more of a comment than a question, but Christle's description of how art is a part of life reminds me of how song is described as a part of various African cultures. as a way of being, everyone sings. It's not about singer and listener, but about community.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. They're very, very communal. You know, it's not. I think a lot of times, just my experience with people visiting, and maybe they spend time with the host family. They have a really hard time that they're never alone.
Mm.
And so in the culture, you know, they don't even think about that. You're always part of like your family unit, your community, your compound. You're always with somebody. That's just how it is. And that never really bothered me too much. But there are some people, they're really looking for their single space. Americans spend a lot of time by themselves. You know, I don't know why the pandemic bothered people so much.
That's ironic. It is. Wow. Thank you. Gloretta, did you have comments to add?
Well, I was going back to the contemporary artists and creativity and the relationship between Nigeria and Ghanaian artists. Some of the cultural organizations like the Day Foundation, the Nabuki Foundation, and the Artists Alliance in Ghana also have relationship with artists in Nigeria, and they exhibit, they collaborate, they exhibit back and forth. And so there's an ongoing relationship, an influx infusion of works, between Nigeria and Ghana. And also, there's also a patron circumstance set up where, a contemporary artist would have a patron who would help commission him for public arts, or a patron would, in Transformative University, endow a chair of art, a chair for the art department for a major university there. So it's a lot of that is happening through individuals who are fostering the arts, the African arts, and they're adamant in terms of keeping those traditional treasures in Africa. One of the colleagues that I visited at the Yourself Foundation was traveling in the States, even to the Met Museum, to loan a number of works from his collection to the Met. And so he was traveling, and I received a phone call from the United States, civil service, saying that we have somebody who wants to come by to visit your gallery. Like, really? Who? Oh no, he's from Africa, and we're just gonna come in with him, and we just like to visit the gallery. I didn't find out till afterwards who he was. A prince, a major patron of the arts who was just in the country to share his collection, but he wanted to be in the community and see what Black artists were doing, African American artists, and he wanted to, foster a relationship. And it's just having those types of conversations and being open to something that's unexpected. It's just really important to, if it's a bridge, try to cross it and try to open it up to somebody else. And so someone would have an opportunity to come to the States, or someone would have an opportunity to go to Africa, in terms of an exchange or just a conversation. Those bridges are always going to be there.
Mm.
I'm glad that we mentioned the universities, because people go to school just like we do here to learn their trade or their profession.
That's very
artists included. Yeah.
I think that's very exhilarating for artists, and well, not just artists, but I'm in that artist mentality mode right now. I think it's very exhilarating to know that there would be maybe a heightened appreciation sometimes in a whole other location. And I think it's probably, would you agree, very important that one does not feel kind of downtrodden, perhaps, if they feel underappreciated, perhaps, maybe underfunded or whatever, as an artist, because Gloretta, just as you gave an example, someone from somewhere else could very well value it so highly that they would seek you out. And to maintain oneself and one's practice with that in mind, sometimes with that broader awareness. Would you agree?
Definitely.
Another question came in. It says, I'm thinking about how slavery is taught in the US and wondering, is slavery and the slave forts like Cape Coast taught in Ghanaian schools?
You know, at the time that I was there, it was just beginning to be taught in the schools. And, but you know, it's kind of a sensitive subject, just like it is here in the US. So me as an outsider, I don't know if they would actually tell me, you know, what was really going on as it relates to slavery. I know that when I first was going to like the slave dungeons, and you know, they're right in the village. The people are living pretty much like almost on top of these slave forts, and they're mostly fishing villages that are on the coast.
Yes.
And if you talk to them, they'll say, "Oh no, I didn't know anything about that." But now it seems like it's a little bit different, and you know, and they'll tell you the history. But I'm not quite sure. You know, I mean, it's just like here. There's many different levels, so you know, I'm generalizing. You know what I mean? And so there's, you know, they have many academics who are, or scholars who are, you know, researching the history. And one of the things I just want to say is that, you know, when we're talking about the scholarship here and people are, you know, foremost authorities on slavery, and they're saying, well, there was no documentation, or we didn't, you know, so we can't confirm that. But it's very rare that they actually go to Africa, like say Ghana, and have a conversation with the people there, because I think in reality that they do know the history. And so they could tell you what happened. And so that, to me, that doesn't happen so often. You know, you think that you can learn about a country, you go there for 2 weeks or 3 weeks on a fellowship, and you think that you can learn all this information about the country. In particular, a sensitive subject like slavery, I don't think it's really going to happen, you know.
I'm sorry, Christle, I want to understand. You said you don't think it's going to happen, you said?
Yeah, I don't think that, you know, there's a certain level of trust, I think. What are you going to do with this information? There's a history of people coming in, getting information, and then taking it and making money, or publishing their books, whatever. And the people that they got the information from don't benefit from what they just gave away. You know, and that happens over and over again as relates to, you know, the continent of Africa. And so when you're talking about slavery, you know, I think you have to be aware of that, and you have to spend the time. You have to spend the time. You can't just go in and think that you're going to get the information. I hope that answered that question.
I do have something that not totally relates to that, but when I went to Ghana, I had an opportunity to just catch a small part of Panafest. And at the Panafest in Ghana, they welcome African Americans back to Ghana. And that's something I think this is the first time. I'm not that familiar with it. I think Christle may know a little bit more about Panafest, but because I was there at that time and they were doing a welcome back of us, you know, being from America, coming back to the continent, you know, that was sort of special for me. You know, so there is a recognition of them wanting us to come home and to be embraced, you know, going back to Ghana. So that was an interesting experience for me.
Yes, and I think there's actually, I get these emails from an organization in Nigeria that they're looking for their descendants that were taken. And so it's like a DNA project where you submit your DNA, and then they check to see if maybe you're part of their lineage. And so they're celebrating the people that they have found that were taken. So there are things that are happening on, you know, the African side. And I also know that they are creating a database with DNA samples in Ghana, just for that same reason, to connect, to make that connection between African Americans and Africans. So it is happening. But like I said, it's a continent, you know, and this is just like a small little, you know, I'm really talking about Ghana, Nigeria, and maybe Benin.
Panifest, what time of year does that happen?
Mhm.
Happens in July.
Oh, almost around this time.
Mhm.
And so you said, is that I guess celebration also mentioned in Nigeria by the same name, or does this initiative kind of have different titles?
No,
That's a separate festival. It's celebration. Christle could tell you a little bit more about that.
it is a celebration of people coming back to the homeland, to the motherland, and they have they do tours in the slave port. They do the trail going from which people who were captured, they were marched from the interior, and so they do that. They have Emancipation Day. They have all kinds of events that you can participate in, and it happens. Does it happen every year? I think so.
Is it every 2 years?
Every 2
or?
years. I mean, yeah, every 2 years.
Yeah.
And this year it's happening.
You said this year it is happening?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. That is good to know.
Mm.
Well, speaking of transformative narratives, I think I'd like to open it up to the audience. Is there anything that you heard today that you found particularly of interest to you? Something maybe you didn't expect? Or is there something you would like to ask Christle and Gloretta? I personally am very interested in, Gloretta, you talked about sensory overload when you got there. The sights, everything, just to feel and understand the experience of from getting off of the plane, and then like what other things do you come across that it's I just think you can't have too much of that real experience.
Okay, sensory overload. Traveling from the airport to Oyo Town, we were staying, and being on the highway. And the one thing I wasn't prepared for is the vendors that would be there on the highway, on the streets, and you can buy anything from the vendor. Clothes, furniture, food. They were just actually in between the lanes of traffic. And hats, clothing, you get a whole wardrobe, just like, just put your hands out there like, oh, I want and so it was such an overload because why are all these people in the street? And I was like really freaking out because I really didn't know what to make of it. And it took me a minute to just kind of get acclimated to how things were and what the flow was. And I thought that was really fascinating though. So I really took a lot of photographs of the different vendors because I just couldn't believe the type of things they were selling. Anything you could think of, like I said, including furniture, clothing, food,
puppies.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you name it, they had it. And it's like, okay, I guess I could get used to this. But that was really interesting to see that, that array of goods and color and energy.
How long
lots
did
of color, lots of energy, and the skin tones. Okay, I'm an artist, I love like blue, black, black, brown, just different shades of white teeth, smooth ebony skin. I was so jealous. And so like, and I want to say, oh, you have really beautiful skin. I wanted to say that. I just kind of looked and smiled and admired from afar, but I enjoyed that. It was just, because they were flawless.
Were you asked anything? Were there any questions that you were asked coming, I don't know, as an American, was there anything that you found that was surprising maybe to people you encountered in Ghana and Nigeria that that might have seemed kind of puzzling?
I ran into something that was I had a chuckle when I was in Nigeria. I was also there for the Orisha World Conference, which is the major Yoruba conference they have in Nigeria. And I had to really get into the traditional clothing. I couldn't just be American, so I had my authentic clothing. I didn't know how to wrap my gele, because I was just like hopeless. And so all I did was just stand there with the cloth in my hand and an elder came up to me and kind of like clicked her teeth and just wrapped it for me because she knew that I just did not have a clue, but she hooked me up. I was definitely hooked up to the point where I was at the conference, somebody approached me and asked me like, "Oh, are you available for marriage?" Excuse me? And, like, I'm just looking like, what do you mean? I don't know whether it was the clothing that I was wearing or how the head wrap was wrapped that meant that perhaps I was an available young woman. I don't know. It could have been a joke on me. Who knows? But, it's a visual language with fabrics and colors and symbols, that are on the fabrics, so if you don't know how to interpret it, you don't know what you're really getting into. So I got rescued.
That was a compliment.
I look too authentic.
That was a compliment.
It was a compliment.
Yeah.
It was. That meant that I had transitioned, to my true homeland. I was totally accepted.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was really funny. I enjoyed that though. It was just like, okay, I have been accepted in my homeland. But I don't want to get married yet. Oh boy.
No, wow. It's good to know there is a language in the visual, the fabric and the,
fabrics, the icons, the symbols, how you wrap things, how things are draped. It's how you communicate. That's the beauty of fabric. It tells a lot.
I would argue that how people dress in America also communicates. I just think it's a lot more almost subliminal. It seems like people don't seem to say, well, this is what you're saying. Advertising. I mean, that's a whole other industry. But we seem to not be taught to pay attention, overtly pay attention, but just to be it has an influence.
I'll tell you one thing. I would get very depressed when I would come home. Because everyone wears black, beige, blue, and that's it.
Boring.
And I would just get so sad because it was just such a feast of color and lights and beauty, and
you were energized. You could feel the energy.
It would just feed your creativity, and it just felt good, because no fear. No fear. Like here, if you put on something too bright, people will ask you, "Are you sure you want to wear that? That's kind of bright." The brighter, the better.
Oh, so you actually felt energized by the colors? You actually felt?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's good to know. We have a hand up, Beth. Let's see here. Yes,
yeah, I think you actually went right into my question, which was I have been struck, both of you, Christle and Gloretta. Gloretta, you talked about people being walking works of art, and Christle, when you talked about the beadwork, there was something that happened that you talked about beadwork in a way that the typical person visiting another place would not talk about it. Your hands did this, and so I think what you're doing now is answering my question, which is, do you think as artists you entered this space, and I mean you entered this space in a different way, I think, than most people going to their ancestral homeland would? And that I think you just the way you're talking, or maybe you're better able to express that impact. So I guess part of me would say, just keep saying what you've been saying, because that was my question.
Well, no, I get what you're saying. I always think of it as you just come and you take whatever is there, like you just allow it to experience it, whatever it is, as opposed to coming in with a predetermined notion of what you think it should be, and then you start looking down at people. And many people came and I would show them around, and they would their eyes would be closed. They wouldn't see these things that I see. They would see that the person is poor. They don't have shoes on. There's something, they're not looking at it the way that I do. And so for me, heaven would be to, accidentally get off the trotro, which is like a little VW bus kind of thing, and find myself in the bead village on like the day that they have their market, and I would be in heaven, you know?
Yes.
And that's where Gloretta's sensory overload would come in, because how do you,
Oh, yeah.
just so many beautiful,
Mhm.
or cloth or whatever it is.
How long did it take to get acclimated to where you didn't feel, where you felt like it was safe to go outside? I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit, but you know how sometimes it's just like, I just need to like take this in. And how long did it take from the time you arrived? I had to ask both of you to the time that you felt, okay, like I'm ready to experience.
We hit the ground running. You know, there wasn't a whole lot of downtime. We maybe slept for a little bit, and that was it. You know, as soon as we were able to get our eyes open, it's just like, where are we going? What's next? You know, who's taking us where? Let's hit the road. You know, because we had no time to waste. I just was open to everything. You know, and like Christle said, you can't have a preconceived notion of what's going to happen, and you can't be judgmental. You know, people have, you know, they eat different types of things. You know, you can't have, you know, thumb your nose at what they're eating. You know, you need to be adventurous. You should ask questions, though, to make sure you know what you're eating, because it may not be what you ordered, but that's part of the experience. But I think that it was so much to see. And I was there for 3 weeks. So that was a good stretch of time that, you know, because 1 or 2 weeks would not have been enough. 3 weeks was manageable because you had an opportunity to go to a lot of different places, meet people, travel, you know, between, you know, Nigeria to Ghana, then come back, you know, so it gave you more leeway. A more comprehensive and compelling visit. We have a block of time, and I try to cram everything into like 1 or 2 weeks, which is like almost impossible to do, especially when you have to travel, you know, distances. It's not like you just, you know, walk out and catch a bus, you know, and you know, walk to the next place. You know, you really have to have a vehicle at a lot of these places.
I'm glad that you asked that question, because we didn't really talk about this. When you get there, you feel, as African American, you feel safe.
Yeah.
There's so much racism. You know, I was taught, just like you've probably been hearing with all this things that have been going on, that you need to protect yourself. You can't do this, you can't do that. I didn't really know the extent of the racism that is here. But when I went to Ghana, it was gone. Not to say that there's some issues, but the lightness that I felt was like unbelievable. The burden of racism that you carry with you
every day, every waking moment,
what raises your blood pressure and the diet, all these illnesses are symptomatic of this oppression that is happening here.
It's true. It is chronic.
Yeah, and so when you go there, that's not, you know, so you're energized, you know, and you feel like you can do anything, because
because you can.
You can, and it feels safe. I mean, not to say to be crazy about, you know, you have to keep your head on, but you know,
watch out for the money changers.
Right, and take your anti-malaria pills and things like that. But you know, yeah. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. And you did touch on currency. I was going to ask about that. I thought, you know, that's not very interesting nor artsy, but it is a fact of life. So, yeah, thank you for that, Christle. Some of those realities that are very real, but perhaps not unseen, but very much felt. So, audience members, if you have anything else you would like to say or ask, feel free to raise your hand by clicking on that reactions button on the bottom. And Christle and Gloretta, let me know they really want to hear from the audience. And yeah, you are welcome to say something if you would like to. Okay, we have hand up for Cindy, and let's unmute. Let's see here.
Hi, I really want to thank you both. I'm carried away by your stories. I'm just, it's really wonderful. one of the things that I've wondered about is when you were there, did you have any opportunities to interact in real time with some of the other artists from there? I hear you say how much you were transformed and how much what you saw there you've brought back in your own work and in your interpretations. I just, as I've been sort of walking with you through your stories, I'm picturing just all of the different scenes that you've been talking about. And I'm just curious about whether or not you had the opportunity to interact directly with individual artists while you were there.
Thank you, Cindy.
Well,
Yes,
oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I did meet a group of artists who were, they were poets and they did spoken word. And I spent a lot of time with them. In fact, I tried to set up a collaboration here in the US, but it never happened, unfortunately. I could just see, the benefit from both sides. But it was just a little bit too much for both of them, both parties. But yeah, and that was really wonderful. And I'm still in contact with them. So.
Gloretta?
Yes, I was very fortunate to meet artists at the galleries I had mentioned earlier in Ghana, at the Day Foundation, the Nabuki Foundation, and at the Artists Alliance in Ghana, and also at the Oya Self Foundation. They had the artists there to engage with me and to discuss their works, take me to their studios. So it was really fantastic. For the amount of time that I spent there, I had a very high caliber experience. And it just really, I was just amazed at what they were doing, and to be able to have that opportunity. I'm just really grateful that I took that journey, and I certainly hope to go back again to, renew those relationships.
Mm-hmm. Well, for audience members who have not raised your hand, I do want to let you know that I do see your smiles and that you're enjoying the event. And speaking of that, I have to credit Christle and Gloretta for putting it in this format. They said, we want to connect with everyone. We don't want a webinar. We want to interact with one another. So, so you are visible, and I can tell that, there's a lot of appreciation here. So I thank you for that. Any last comments, questions, or also Gloretta and Christle, if there's something additional that you would like to share?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity to host us. This is really fabulous that you're committed to supporting artists, and you have really made such an impact. And we just want to thank you for your tenacity and the caliber of the work that you do, with the artist community.
Thank you. And then in turn, I have to thank the Urban Ministry for giving the platform. Christle?
I also want to thank you. This was really great. I loved having the conversation with all of you, and really do appreciate that the Urban Ministry is doing so much for artists during this really difficult time.
Yes.
And for the UU Ministry of Music as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Christle and Gloretta. And we have people expressing their appreciation here all at once here in the chat. I'm really grateful to you both, Kathy says, for participating and teaching us more about your experiences. Very interesting. I'll be watching your work in the future. And we have someone, LD says, thank you for talking about your art and experiences. And thank you all for supporting the Urban Ministry, for making this work possible and exciting, and I feel appreciated. And also, if you'd like to learn more about the Urban Ministry's Artist Amplification Initiative, please visit uuum.org. Thank you to Concord for hosting. Again, thank you, Christle and Gloretta. And also, thank you to our tech team in the background. So, yes. And speaking of our tech team, we will be posting, Greg will post how to contact Christle and Gloretta if you'd like to reach out. So everyone have a wonderful evening. It's 8:29. We'll finish on time. And we hope to see you again soon.